Hello, hello. Here we are again at the Ropeadope Room with another episode of 21 Soul. And I'm here with Andrew Finn Magill. Welcome.
Thanks, Louis.
Thanks for making the trip.
My pleasure.
You're on the road.
Yep.
Denver, you said?
I was in Denver on Friday. What's today, Tuesday? Yeah, New York and Boston before that. Connecticut yesterday and Allentown tonight.
Down to Philly and over to the airport. Beautiful. Thanks for coming by. I want to get a sense. So if you're in Denver, you're in Connecticut, you're doing different things. You have an album with us. Always hard for me to say. Canta violino.
Perfect.
Violino, or do you say violino?
Violino.
Violino.
Canta
Okay.
violino, yeah.
Okay. So, but you're on the road doing different things, I sense.
Yeah.
Right? So, some of this is traditional Irish music?
Yeah, actually, so New York was all Brazilian music with a great Brazilian guitarist based in New York. Wednesday was all Irish music, as you guessed. And then Friday was swing dance, playing like manouche jazz and swing from the 30s. And then yesterday was Irish music. So yeah.
And then tonight will be?
Tonight will be Brazilian music.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. So when you sent your story and this album to me or to us here at Ropeadope, it was just so immediate for me.
Oh, cool.
Because it didn't fit. You know, we have some history, like Jonathan Scales.
Yeah.
You know, playing steel pan. And I have to say that I was more familiar with, or actually that unfolded because I had an impression of steel pan.
Right.
Right? And this is what steel pan's all about. This is how I've heard it in context in the past. And
Sure.
then he just tore that apart.
Yeah.
So do you see a comparison there in what you're doing with the violin?
No, I would say I'm not going to compare myself to Jonathan Scales. I think Jonathan is... so the funny thing is, Jonathan was the only... I used to tell people that, like, Jonathan is, like, the guy who turned steel pan into a jazz instrument. And then I met Jonathan, and he's like, hey, listen to these guys. Man, this cat's playing in Asheville on Friday. I'm like, whoa, there's another steel jazz pianist, or there's another one. I think that Jonathan is still, like, very different, and he's doing his own thing. He's got a real distinct sound. So, for better or worse, the violin is an instrument with 500 years of history. So, and it's played in so many different genres. That said, anyone can have their own sound, but I think the sort of how do we say, the combination of Brazilian, Irish, jazz, and then actually like American music too, which I grew up playing, is a fairly uncommon combination. I think that if I have anything going for me, it's that the challenge is just figuring out how to leverage all those to create something that is different.
Well, let's track it backwards. So you grew up in a family of musicians?
Yeah.
Playing Irish music with the fiddle as a central instrument?
Well, for me, but my mom's a flute player, my dad's a guitar player. He plays mandolin and sings, but I didn't start playing the fiddle till I was 10, and despite hearing a lot of fiddle music, it never really interested me that much. I kind of picked it up by chance one day. My sister wanted to take violin lessons when she was 3, so she's a good bit younger than me. And 10 minutes into the first lesson, she quit. But my parents, they had already paid for like a month's rental and a month's worth of lessons. They're like, no, we're not letting this investment go to waste.
We have another child.
It's like, Finn, you're learning it.
Here you go.
Yeah. It's like, how convenient, another child right here. So we they swapped it for a bigger size violin, and after my first lesson, it was like the opposite experience. I was addicted, and I've been addicted for 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So I just want to understand history. How does the violin become the fiddle?
Sure. Well,
like in Irish tradition, how did that happen?
So the instrument itself is the same, right? I always well, the distinction I would make between the fiddle and the violin is two sensibilities, two different ways of playing it. But I think the early Irish music, before it was what we now think of as Irish music, was Baroque dance music, or it was European dance music of that era. And like, if you listen to some Baroque music, this is very clear because like the jig. Well, you know, I think a lot of us have heard of like to dance an Irish jig. Yeah. Actually comes from the gigue, Gigue, which is a movement in like every Bach partita, seemingly.
I am learning so much. This is great.
Yeah. So these are all like European dances from 1700s or earlier that eventually moved out of the dance halls and into the homes, I guess. Well, they moved into dance halls later, but now, Irish traditional music dance halls. And so the music just transformed into what we now call traditional Irish music.
Mm-hmm. Now, how when you're playing traditional Irish music, Asheville, North Carolina, your parents were here like second, third, fourth generation? Like what second or third?
I think they're like more like third or fourth.
Third or fourth generation. Okay. So this is not what we know as Appalachian music, which is Welsh Irish. Like what are there differences there
between Appalachian music and Irish music?
Yeah.
So a lot of the Appalachian music, at least in North Carolina, Tennessee, I would say most of the Appalachians, a lot of that music. So as you mentioned, it's a big melting pot of like Welsh, English, lots of places, but there are a lot of Scottish settlers, actually, that moved into the Appalachians, and then that music mixed with African music, and then out of that we get what a lot of people commonly refer to as just old time, but we'll call it traditional Appalachian music. So,
but same instrument all the way through.
The fiddle,
block, right?
Yeah. So it's
people expressing themselves in different ways.
Right. It's interesting how like the fiddle has become so ubiquitous in so many different genres, except for Brazilian music. So maybe that could be our segue.
Well, there it is. You just see what I'm driving at. I want to get a sense of the history of how this stuff happens. I think a lot of people just look at it and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's that."
Sure.
But I'm really fascinated, and with the origin of an instrument and how it travels as the people travel, and how it changes as people travel.
Yeah,
Some of this has long logical history, and then some things just spring up.
Right.
Some are the result of oppression. In the case of the steel pan, they were not allowed to play drums for the longest time in Trinidad, and then Trinidad became an oil nation.
Okay.
And then when they were finally non-colonial, they were allowed to play drums again.
Wow.
They grabbed the steel drum, cut it in half, oil drum, and started to create this instrument, right?
Cool.
But you're kind of doing single-handedly, sort of making like an evolutionary leap. I mean, there aren't too many people doing what you're doing. So let's tell that story, though. So you're in Asheville, and you somehow go to Brazil. How does that happen?
Yeah, so it happens with a girl, like a lot of things. I met this amazing woman, and she's like, "Move here." And I was like, "Okay." So I did.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I was living in New York City at the time, studying jazz and bluegrass and various other things. I didn't know anything about Brazilian music. So when I got to Brazil, when I decided I was going to move there, I was like, "All right, I'll do one lesson." I'd been there before and I had some contacts, so I messaged them and I was like, "Hey man, like put me in touch with the baddest cat you know. Like who's the guy for choro, which is this, which is the genre I first started learning, choro, choro." Okay. So my friend Ricardo was like, "Oh, I got just the guy." So he sent me this guy's contact, Luis Barcelos, amazing mandolinist, and this lesson just blew my mind. I was like completely overwhelmed by both Luis's virtuosity and just the music itself. Like the music was unlike anything I'd ever heard.
Can you break down the instrumentation in that traditional? I can't. Choro.
Choro. Yeah, choro.
Okay. I'm getting a little better.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Yeah, the instrumentation would be pandeiro, which is a tambourine essentially, They have a different way of playing it. 7-string guitar, which does the like the counterpoint bass lines.
String kind of guitar?
Yeah, 7-string. More and more players are using like steel string, but yeah, it's historically always been nylon. And then, the cavaquinho is pretty important as well. It's a little ukulele-looking instrument.
Okay.
Well, in fact, the ukulele is a cavaquinho-looking instrument because it comes from the cavaquinho.
Ah, there we go.
The
history.
Yeah, the cavaquinho is a Portuguese instrument, and then it was brought over to Mexico, which from there was brought to Hawaii, and but the original instrument is steel strung, not nylon strung, and the cavaquinho's role is to basically just play what's called the levadas, which is all the rhythmic stuff, and there's lots of different kinds of rhythms in Brazilian music.
So akin to rhythm guitar and American rock and roll, and then a lead guitar would be with the other guitarist. Yes.
Yeah. So the other guitarist actually has a more secondary role because he would be playing the counterpoint lines to the soloist, who would be a saxophone player or flute player, or it could be another guitar player. Sure.
Okay.
Accordion, violin.
So violin is there.
Well, historically, no.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So then you go in to take lessons.
Yeah.
And you have your violin.
Right.
You're learning.
I just,
Did
I
they
figured
think that was strange?
Well, they didn't because, unbeknownst to me, there were violinists. Not a lot, but so in the past 20 years, there's been sort of just an explosion of interest in the violin in Brazilian popular music. So in Portuguese, everything that's not classical they call popular.
Okay.
So, which I'm sorry, classical music fans. It's like kind of a subtle jab, but
basically that defines them as unpopular. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't say it.
Yeah.
But so historically, Brazilian music has never really, like popular Brazilian music, has never had violin because they just associated it with classical music. So playing, I liken it to, if you met like a blues flugelhorn player, you'd be like, really? It's like, I want to hear that,
We have a rock French horn player.
See, there you go.
Here at Ropeadope. So, yeah.
Sounds great. Well,
I get it.
That's why I love Ropeadope. So at one point, there was a guy in the 50s, a guy named Fafá Lemos, who was like the first popular violinist, and he played samba, and he played, like the popular repertoire of his day. And then he kind of like slipped into oblivion. He went off to Hollywood to make his fame and fortune. I don't know if he found either. I don't know. He certainly didn't find fame because people forgot about him. Yeah. And then it wasn't until the late 90s that you started to see like more violinists sprout up playing non-classical music in Brazil. And to the point where now there's loads. There's so
it wasn't shocking to the instructor at the time that you brought a violin.
Well, I had no idea that this instrument existed at all in Brazilian music. I just thought I would learn it on the violin because, like, that's my obsession in life and the way I understand the world. So I was just going to learn this music on violin.
Wow, that's beautifully said. Understanding you sought to understand Brazilian music through the violin.
Yeah.
As you do.
Yeah.
Many things.
Still doing it. Yeah.
Wow. So, what was the moment that you knew that I'm deep into this music and I'm going to compose in this?
It was probably that first day.
Right away.
Yeah, because just the way I learned the violin. I mean, the day of my first violin lesson, I went home and I did all of my homework that she had given me for the entire week.
Wow.
I did it that first day, and I even actually went beyond that. I was taking Suzuki lessons. She's like, just learn the first variation on Twinkle Twinkle, and I went home and learned all 5. I was just obsessed from the word go.
Wow.
And this was kind of the same thing, because the music was just so fascinating to me that I had to go home and understand it. And so I started practicing 6-8 hours a day.
Wow.
Brazilian music, and then at some point very early on, I started composing, and I've always composed in whatever genres I'm learning, just as a way to study it. Really, kind of forces you to say, how well do you really know this?
So how does that process work? I mean, is it? I mean, obviously there's intense creativity involved in composing music. I mean, I assume sometimes that it's somewhat logical and not
Yeah.
forced, but certainly structured. But also
Sure.
there has to be some inspiration. How do you? What's the process when you sit down and you want to compose, even early on,
Sure.
Brazilian music on a violin?
Well, I think I had a lot of different things I did. One was taking choros, which already had the chord, so the chord progressions, the standard chord progressions already exist. So I would rewrite different melodies over chord progressions to choros
Existing.
that already existed. Yeah. There's like a pretty standard form for choro, actually.
So a lot of people are doing that, regardless.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think, like, I've studied jazz for like 15 years, so I think that really helped me because I've spent so much time transcribing and then, like, working on solo ideas. You're basically, like, for me, I'm transcribing other musicians and, like, stealing their licks and expanding upon those licks. Mm-hmm. And so, that's kind of what I did with choro and writing my own melodies. Taking, like, the shorter versions of licks and stuff and kind of basing my melodies off of those.
And then when do you know that you're finished?
That's a good question. It takes longer and longer.
Yeah.
I used to be able to, like, finish them in an hour, but... I think, like, the best tunes often write themselves, is what I found. Like, at least the... like, I always go back and revise. I always edit.
Okay.
Because I think that's important. But like, I think like a great melody, like if you're in the moment, the melody's just flowing. Sometimes, like, you can just churn them out in an hour, and then I'll go back and I was very fortunate to have a band. So as soon as I started learning this music, I was like, all right, I want to play with people. So I found some other musicians down there, and I was like, I convinced them to form a band with me, basically. Uh-huh. I was like, you guys have been playing this music your whole life, but I think you should play this American fiddler's weird Brazilian tunes instead,
And they were game? They were just like...
They were totally game, man.
Right,
yeah, and they were really great. They were like mentors for me, because at band practice, I would bring in whatever compositions I'd written that week, because I was writing like a tune a day at one point. And so I'd bring in the week's compositions, and they would run through and be like, all right, this is cool. I would change this and maybe like this chord substitution. If you really want to sound Brazilian, you'll.
Well, that's one of the things that I wanted to ask you is how do you define success in this process of this new variation of music, which incorporates your composition, your instrument, and traditional Brazilian music? What's the definition of success? Is it more traditional, or I nailed the traditional and I have this on top of it? Like, what? How do you define?
I think, like, creating something new within something old. Like, the best innovators were able to create something so fresh yet so familiar at the same time.
There you go.
I honestly, like, Brazilian music has a real tradition of composing to the point, well, specifically Brazilian choro, but other Brazilian genres, you can pretty much trace back every composition to its composer, which is different than, say, Irish music or Appalachian music, where oftentimes we don't know who wrote the tune. It's like we just play these tunes and they just came from the hills of West Virginia. But
is that specifically because of people not writing music, not writing?
I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Because a lot Brazilian music is pretty technical, and a lot of choro musicians. Well, choro is very technical, and a lot of people come to choro from classical music. Mm-hmm. Not all, in fact, some of the greatest choro musicians, that wasn't the case. But so you have a lot of musicians in the genre that can read music, that have studied music theory. So naturally, the tunes get written down. And I think that has a lot to do with it.
You know how to do it, yeah. And so, what about the improvisational piece of jazz in the context of now this the things that you've composed? Is that happening?
Well, it isn't.
Or is it happening in the composition process, and then afterwards you're just playing?
So for Canta Violino, I deliberately I tried to write more of a jazz fusion, jazz Brazilian, because like there was a while there where I was just trying to like basically reproduce what had already been done, and my band was like, look, man, you're from the States, you play Irish music, you play an instrument which we don't even really have. It's like you have all this to offer, like you should be using that. Like write music that leverages all this. And I was like, all right, because I had the encouragement of like some Brazilian musicians I really respected, I started to write tunes which maybe took more liberties.
Great advice.
But I felt completely okay doing that. In fact, I think that's a really important part of it is like, innovation, just trying to find something different and pushing the boundaries.
We talk a lot about, and it always comes up, it seems to come up in most interviews about, the word jazz.
Yeah.
And, there are those that are talking about the origin of the term being racist, jackass music, as Christian Scott enlightened us to. And there are those that have a particular idea of what jazz is, that the best jazz, again, Christian Scott says, some people think the best jazz is stuff that's already been played. But what I really like about it is that you can take something as adventurous as what you're doing, and we can just call it jazz. Because there's no other genre that is as expansive.
Right. No, in fact, I don't even think of it as a genre. I kind of think of it as like a musical philosophy. Yeah. Because it's just like jazz.
It's a business philosophy for us, I think.
Well, yeah. Just put it in the general camp of philosophy then.
Somebody asked us, like, are you a jazz label? And I'm like, you're not a jazz label, are you? And I'm like, I guess so. I think so. But I think other jazz labels probably wouldn't. But
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, and I get it. I think there's been a lot of backlash to, like, everyone trying to piggyback off the term jazz, too. So people are, like, a lot more... Some people, like, can get a little more purist about the term.
Sure.
But I think, like,
You're trying to preserve it like the term classical, right?
Yeah.
That's a great art form.
Right.
Don't dilute it, but...
Yeah. But what I always remind myself of is that, like, the greatest jazz musicians, like, never intended to be jazz musicians. Yeah. Like, they weren't out to, like, create this whole new genre, I think. And,
and honestly, there to preserve something. Yeah.
Yeah, like,
explore.
I think, like, the best jazz musicians, I think I actually heard David Grisman say this, the great mandolinist, but, like, Charles Mingus music, I mean, that's Mingus music more than jazz. Like, Miles Davis, that's Miles Davis music.
It really is.
That's Dizzy Gillespie music.
David Grisman.
Right?
Whew.
Yeah.
There's a guy you really don't hear much about David Grisman anymore, but that's just...
He's still out there, yeah.
Beautiful.
I think he's sort of... he's busier than he has been, from what I can tell. They just did
Jerry Garcia, David Grisman.
Oh, the dog tapes?
Record that they did together.
Yeah, the pizza tapes.
No, there was an actual...
Shady
Grove, I think, was the title of the record, maybe, or that was the lead song. Yeah, it was great. No, the Grateful Dead really hipped me to a lot of different styles of music. Strangely enough, as I look back, it's really funny to me. Like, wow, these are the songs they're playing. They're playing Hank Williams, and they're playing, some bluegrass tune.
Yeah.
And they're playing Mama Tried.
Well, that kind of speaks to what we're talking about, isn't it? Like, just this very very diverse influences and like drawing on different genres, And I think. Like jazz has always done that.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I consider it more of a philosophy than.
It's a big tent. Yeah.
It's a big tent. Yeah.
Beautiful. So what's next? We're just about out of time.
Sure.
You're going to be on the road in the U.S.
Today I'm actually starting a 2-week tour.
Nice.
Well,
is there a lot of dancing going on at these shows?
Sometimes.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. I mean, samba dancing, it can be a little intimidating. I say that because I'm about to start a tour with my Brazilian group, but I always encourage the audience to dance no matter what genre and just see what happens.
Yeah. Improvise.
Yeah, yesterday we actually had some dancing at the thing I played at. Some girls got up and they did some Irish step dancing. It was great.
Beautiful. So you're in PA?
Yeah, we're kind of working our way down to Charlotte. from here. So PA, New Jersey, West Virginia, Virginia, North Carolina.
Beautiful, beautiful. People can find it at
AndrewFinnMcGill.com.
Yeah. Or on the Ropeadope website. And I just want to say thank you for opening my eyes and ears to new styles and bringing it to us.
Thanks for giving me a platform to do so. Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Cheers.
See you.